Hello everybody and welcome back to the Virtual Racing Compound Porsche Super Cup. You join myself, Jack Werrell, once again in the commentary box, here to run you through all the highlights. We are here for round 4 at Redbull Ring, and the drivers in the background tearing around throughout the qualifying session, trying to get some times on the board, all vying over that top spot. And of course, Redbull Ring not being the most, let's go with, complex circuit. Starting at the front can really benefit you, but with some heavy braking zones and a fair bit of undulation change, we could be in for a very close round indeed. Of course, we saw round 3 take place at Interlagos. That was a very adventurous round as well. There was lots of action from start to finish of both the sprint and the feature race. Much like this evening, we do have a 15-minute sprint race followed by a 25-minute feature race. So plenty of action to look forward to, and we will crack on with it in just a few moments' time. So with qualifying completed, we do have the grid available to us, and you can see now that on pole position is that man there, Peter Plastow for the Virtual Racing Compound Blue team, a 1 minute 30.480, the benchmark he set, only 43 thousandths of a second behind was Jozo Skull. Then we get back to Chris Roberts and Mariano Lazart, followed by Remco Barlow, Matthew Forrest, Cody Steig, Nicolas Cucatto, Ari Sherwood, Timothy van der Broek, Stuart Jacklin and Stephen Orrell rounding out your grid. Only 12 cars here at Redbull Ring, but that shouldn't take away from the immense action on the way. You can see everybody lining up now, only a few cars yet to take to the circuit. Remco Barlow and Nicolas Cucatto, the final two, we're waiting for. You can see their empty slots on the grid, and in a few moments time we will be going racing here at Redbull Ring. So now with all of the drivers on the grid, we are ready to go racing here at Redbull Ring for the first time this evening. A little bit of crawling further back on the grid. It's Peter Plastow on pole position. He gets an okay start, a great start in the background from Remco Barlow in the WPR racing machine. Makes side-to-side contact with Mariano Lazart up towards turn 1. Jozo Skull looking to the inside. He's got a car all over his tail. Chris Roberts takes the wider line in, nice and conservative, but does manage to remain in third place for the moment. Looking all the way around the outside is Remco Barlow, I believe, trying to challenge for what will be 4th place. You can see already a good gap being posted from Peter Plastow. He's managed to build up a nice bit of breathing room. Let's have a look back towards turn 2, the very sharp right hand. There's a little bit of contact up the road. What has happened? Everybody has continued on by the looks of it. No further issues, just a little bit of contact as expected on the first lap of any motor race. Now we can see all of the cars nose to tail diving down towards turn 1. There's Peter Plastow, followed by Jozo Skull, Chris Roberts, Mariano Alfredo, Remco Barlow, Nicolas Cucatto, Timothy van der Broek, and you can see a change of position up the road, almost 3 wide. Nicolas Cucatto manages to work his way up the inside. He's gone past 3 cars already. Timothy van der Broek having a little look around the outside of Remco Barlow, couldn't quite get the move done. Now you can see the Apex car in the background of Ari Sherwood under pressure from Matthew Forrest. Matt on the outside for the next left-hander. Can he make it work? It'll evolve to the inside for the right-hander before we enter the final sector of the circuit. Cars all over the road, one sideways in the middle of the road. Who was that? It was Timothy van der Broek. A little bit of contact with, I think, who was that? Stephen Orrell did make contact and has ended up pointing the wrong way. So Stephen Orrell and Timothy van der Broek. Stephen Orrell returns to the pit lane. Chris Roberts still sat there in third place. The lead gap has come down a little bit. Jozo Skull now only half a second away from our leader, Peter Plastow. There is Mariano Lazart for Virtua Racing, sat there in 4th place, not too far back. There is Nicolas Cucatto. Remco Barlow still all over his tail. Little bit of a gap to Cody Steig. Matthew Forrest still trying to charge forward all over the curb on the exit of turn 1, trying to better the run down the long straight before it goes uphill into the heavy braking zone of turn 2. Ari Sherwood sat there in 9th place, and rounding out your top 10 at the moment is Stuart Jacklin. And there's tyre smoke in the background. Chris Roberts all over the road and has ended up in the barrier and dropping right the way down into 9th place. Let's have a look to see what happened there. So on the run up through the corner, did he jump on the throttle too early? Did he hit the curb? Hit the curb, unsettled the rear of the car, jumped on the brakes in pure desperation to not make any hard contact with the barrier. Managed to make it work, playing it nice and safe, trying to rejoin as safely as possible. A little bit of a wobble on the grass, but did manage to rejoin, although that being right towards the tail end of the order, down in 10th place. So while all that was going on, Matthew Forrest has managed to work his way past Cody Steig. Timothy van der Broek has retaken to the circuit in 11th place. Quite a way back. Stuart Jacklin down in 10th place now. Maybe a mistake from himself, but that has allowed Chris Roberts up into 9th place. It's all go in the mid-pack as per always. Matthew Forrest trying to pull away from Cody Steig. The next target for him, Remco Barlow, who's hot on the heels of Nicolas Cucatto as they appear over the crest. Through the final couple of corners they go. The lead gap still within a second. Only 3/4 of a second from Peter Plastow is Jozo Skull. You can see him now closing in the draft. Draft assistance in these cars massively helps your lap time. Matthew Forrest, fastest lap of the race now. The first driver to break into the 1 minute 30 mark. 1 minute 30.830 through the first corner they go once again. Much closer on the exit of the corner this time is Josef Skull. And that will allow him to get the run all the way around Peter Plastow and to take the lead. Pete, no major defence from him this early on in the race. It's not really worth defending, and that does now hand the advantage back to Pete Plastow. He will have all of that draft assistance being gifted to him from Josef Skull. Closing down the straight now after the tight right-hand hairpin on the brakes. Can Matthew Forrest be brave enough? Can he be last of the late breakers? Work his way up the inside of Remco Barlow. Not this time. Slammed the door shut, did Remco Barlow for WPR Racing. As we head through towards Sector 2 now, the downhill double left-handed section. Quite a tricky section to get right. You turn in too early, you can bounce off the curb and end up in the gravel. Turn in too late, you miss the apex and end up in the gravel. You've got to nail it every single lap. It's such a rewarding circuit to drive, but as soon as you give it a little bit of room and you get slightly complacent, you'll find yourself pointing the wrong way. But Matthew Forrest definitely getting closer now in the VRC Orange machine. On the run up towards the final couple of corners now. Got to be so careful not to do what Remco Barlow is doing. The big curbs on the inside. If you slowly lose the rear, as can happen in these Porsches with them being rear-engined, the weight tries to pendulum around. Very well held from Remco. He still continues on without too much of an issue, but that's 2 places lost. Matthew Forrest, pardon me, now back up in towards 5th place. Mariano Lazard sat there in 4th. Up another position, we get to Nicolas Cucatto in 3rd, and the lead duo already starting to escape. 2.7 seconds clear. Josef Skull and Peter Plastow over the rest of the order, but Pete definitely tucked underneath the rear wing. Crossing the line now to go on to lap 6 of the race, and within 0.2 of a second now is Peter Plastow underneath the rear wing, pretty much pushing Josef Skull across the start-finish line. Through turn 1, you can see Pete dropping back just a little bit, so he's got a bit more time to react. Over the curb he goes, gets a great run, somehow manages to keep the car pointing the right way over what is quite a violent exit curb. He will have the draft assistance on the run up to turn 2 all the way up the hill, and that will massively help him. He's not having to punch the hole in the air. Later on the brakes, he looks up the inside. He does have that inside line, and they're still almost side by side. Bouncing over the exit curb this time is Josef Skull. He doesn't manage to get the grip that he would like, and Pete Plastow still side by side. There's nothing to pick between them as they come past the camera now. Heading down towards turn 3, downhill braking zone, brake nice and early. What can Pete do on the brakes? A lock up from Josef Skull. Is that going to force him wide? Yes, it is. And that opens the door for Peter Plastow, and somewhat of an easy move already with a bit of breathing room. So a slight mistake from Josef allowed Pete Plastow into the lead. So Josef Skull, unfortunately, losing the lead. Probably not on the circumstances he'd like, but that does now mean he will be able to reap the rewards from Pete punching that hole in the air for him. Matt Forrest up into P3 now. So 4 seconds away from Josef Skull, just up the road in the number 911 machine. Nicolas Cucatto just sat behind. Then we get back to Remco Barlow and Cody Steig. All over the tail of Harry Sherwood is Chris Roberts. What can he do on the run up towards the penultimate corner? He has a big look to the inside. Is that just to try and dummy the move? Yes, it is. So through the penultimate corner we go. In towards the final corner, using all of the circuit on the exit, is Chris Roberts trying to better his run towards the start-finish line, and all over the gravel on the curb goes Chris Roberts. You can see little bits of gravel being deposited there, and just as Chris Roberts put the loaded wheel onto that, he lost the rear of the car, somehow managed to keep it out of the pit wall with some clever braking and car control, and that allowed him to remain pointing the same direction and somehow remain within a second of the Apex Tech car of Harry Sherwood just up the road, but very, very close to what would have been quite a big incident for Chris Roberts. He continues on nonetheless. So not even 30 seconds of the race remaining now, and you can see Nicolas Cucatto in 4th place has slowly been coming under even more pressure from Remco Barlow. Only 3.5 tenths separating the pair of them. This will be the final lap of the race, so Remco Barlow, he's got to get the move done in this final sector. Down the hill he goes, through the somewhat off-camber left-hander, before bouncing over the curb on the right. But a good run through there has Nicolas Cucatto, and that has, I think, just bought him enough breathing room. But to the line for the first time this evening, the sprint race will be taken by Peter Plastow after advancing on what would be the only mistake from Josef Skull. Gifted him first place after a hard-fought race. He does manage to take towards the top step of the podium. Josef Skull finishes in 2nd place. Matthew Forrest, after a great drive, finishes in third, followed by Nicolas Cucatto. Remco Barlow in fifth place, never managed to get past the Argentine in front of him. And we get back to Chris Roberts, Cody Steig, Harry Sherwood and Stuart Jacklin coming through the final corner now to take 9th place. Unfortunately, throughout that race, we lost Moreno, Lazart, Timothy van der Broek and Stephen Orrell. We saw the pair of them two clash together in the opening stages of the race, but we do have the results available to us now. So let's have a look at the results from the first race of the evening. Pete Plastow, like I say, takes to the top step of the podium. At the end of the race, 6/10 clear of Jo Skuld. Then we get back to Matthew Forrest, rounding out your podium. Nicolas Cucatto, Remco Barlow in 5th. 6th place was Chris Roberts. Cody Steig in 7th. Harry Sherwood in 8th. Stuart Jacklin in 9th. And then we get back to our non-finishers of Mariano Lazard, Timothy van der Broek and Stephen Orrell in 12th place. So that is how the first race of the night found itself, and in a few moments' time we will have 25 minutes of feature race action. So only a few minutes ahead of race 2, and you can see the drivers taking to the grid ahead of the 25 minutes feature race. After what was quite a dramatic race 1, we've got all the more action to look forward to here again from Redbull Ring. You can see Pete Plastow right the way in the background, just over the roof of his VRC teammates Chris Roberts, and Matthew Forrest just over to the left-hand side. You can see the number 6 machine of Stuart Jacklin lining up on pole position for Easy Racing. And still with this 12-car grid, but it definitely doesn't take away from any of the action. Like we saw in race 1, we really weren't short of things to look at. You can see just a couple more drivers left to line up. The purple machine of Remco Barlow lines up now, and it's Harry Sherwood, the final of the Apex Tech cars. Will he take to the grid? You can see everybody bouncing off the rev limiter now. We will very shortly be getting underway here for the second time this evening, and away we go. It's a good start from pole sitter Mariano Lazard. Stuart Jacklin did indeed line up in 2nd place. Remco Barlow up into 3rd. He's been pushed really, really wide. Chris Roberts stuck in the middle there. There's cars absolutely everywhere. Great avoidance driving from Chris Roberts. I'm not 100% sure how he managed to get through there. Remco Barlow involved. I think the other driver involved was Nicolas Cucatto. But as everybody screams their way up towards what is in theory turn 3, up the hill they go. Very late braking from Pete Plastow. Is he going to get it slowed down? No, he isn't. He flips the car sideways, and there's very, very little room for drivers to work their way through. Pete Plastow losing the rear on the brakes, and that meant that Cody Steig, Timothy van der Broek, Nicolas Cucatto all got caught up in that. There's lots of cars with aerodynamic damage this early on in the race. Stephen Orrell with one of the cleanest cars on the grid as it stands, currently sat there in 5th place, leading the way still Mariano Lazard. It's been a good start from him, 1.7 seconds clear now from Stuart Jacklin. Matthew Forrest bearing down on Stuart, trying to get into 2nd place. Chris Roberts knocking on the door of a podium as well. Stephen Orrell, like I say, still sat there in 5th place. Jo Skuld in 6th, then it's Nicolas Cucatto in 7th. Pete Plastow right the way down in 8th, trying to recover from that earlier incident. Nicolas Cucatto, you can see just up the road, lots of damage on the front end of that car and the rear end indeed, so the car won't be 100% at the top of its performance level. Through the penultimate corner we go. Do we see any drivers dive for the pit lane? Somebody very, very sideways up the road. Who was that? It was Jo Skuld. And all of the runoff on the inside, all of the runoff on the outside, but he does manage to continue on after losing what was 3, maybe even 4 places now. Remco Barlow manages to work his way by as he crosses the line, but what, 1 minute and 50 seconds later, after the first lap of racing here at Redbull Ring for the 2nd time this evening, it has been very, very intense indeed. And you can see in the background now Matthew Forrest up into 2nd place on the brakes. He's got the position already covered off. Chris Roberts closing up on the brakes as well, getting very, very close to the tail end of Stuart Jacklin. And we'll just stick with these guys for a little bit longer now on the run down towards turn 4. There's a long straight, so Chris can make the most of the draft assistance. Jumps over to the right, jumps over to the left, and is he going to have a look on the brakes? No, not as yet. Braking on the curbs was Stuart Jacklin. Couldn't get the car slowed down, and into the tail end of Matthew Forrest. Matt deposited in towards the gravel, rejoins as safely as possible, yet more contact in the background. Nicolas Cucatto getting caught up in that. I think Cody Steig unexpectedly was left with nowhere to go, but lots of concertina effects seem to be taking place here this evening at Redbull Ring. Matthew Forrest now trying to recover what positions he can from 5th place. He's got his VRC teammate Peter Plastow sat there in 4th place. The big winner out of all of that, Chris Roberts, up into 2nd place now and chasing down Mariano Lazart. So Mariano Lazart coming under ever-increasing pressure from Chris Roberts. Chris on the brakes, is he going to get it slowed down? Very, very, very slight contact in towards the tail end of Mariano when Chris Roberts couldn't quite get it slowed down with a big lock-up, and it was the slightest of touches, but with steering input already being applied from Chris Roberts or from Mariano Lazart, pardon me, and with the Porsche being rear-engined, it just pendulumed around, and that allowed Chris Roberts through. I'm sure that will be looked at after the race, but Mariano Lazart down into 2nd place now. Chris Roberts with a 5.4 second lead over the rest of the field. Peter Plastow now chomping at the bit, only 1.4 seconds away from the recovering Mariano. Matthew Forrest sat there in 4th place, not too far adrift, and you can see just a little bit further back, Remco Barlow still under pressure from Jo Skull as they work their way through turns 6 and 7. And they run towards the penultimate couple of corners. But it looks like the Slovakian, with all that damage on his car, is really, really struggling for this mid-race pace, which is so crucial in the virtual racing compound Porsche Super Cup. Pops and bangs from the tail end. Very, very good looking and very, very good sounding cars, these Porsche 911 GT3 Cup cars. Of course, this being the 992 variant, still with the naturally aspirated flat 6, as we've slowly become accustomed to within Porsche's racing arsenal. Up the hill they go once again, and will we see a move from Jo Skull? He's 3 seconds, or 3/10 back, pardon me, on the brakes. Can he have a little look, maybe just to fill the mirrors, if anything else? No, this time he's still biding his time. You can see more and more rubber being deposited on the run up towards the right-hander, so drivers struggling with lockups even at this stage in the race. But for the moment, it looks like it's calmed down. We've had yet another incident going the way of Mariano Lazart. What has happened this time? Through turn 6 he goes, and the tail end goes, and all the way around, skipping over the gravel. Does he find the Armco? Yes, he does. Hard sidewards impact into the Armco, and Lazart destined for retirement. That car not fit to race on. Such a shame for Mariano. He'd led for quite a substantial amount of time from pole position, but with contact from Chris Roberts and then maybe a self-inflicted mistake or a mistake succumbed by the damage, but that has now allowed a VRC 1-2-3. Chris Roberts still leading the way, 5.1 seconds clear of Pete Plastow in 2nd place. Matthew Forrest not too far adrift, and then you can see the sparring duo, Remco Barlow and Jo Skull, just sat in the background. And the top 5 really have started to settle down. I say that, but now we're seeing Jo Skull looking to the outside, I think forced by Remco Barlow going defensive. Is he going to get the cutback? Yes, he is. He gets a great run off the corner, finds the traction, and then the run all the way down towards turn 4. Who will have the bravery, I think, to brake as late as possible? Jo Skull with that aerodynamic damage, so he might not be the quickest in a straight line, and the car might not be 100% settled through the corners, but the draft assistant's really helping him. He's reaping the rewards from having a car only less than a second in front of him. And through the very tricky downhill section, the double left-hander, somewhat of a one-way affair. You can't really go for a move unless you force it in towards the apex. But once again, it looks like there's a bit of breathing room between the pair of them. So now in towards the final 5 minutes of the race. We've still not seen any other battles develop on the circuit. The lead gap now down to 2.6 seconds between Chris Roberts and Pete Plastow. But Jo Skull still hasn't found anything to throw at Remco Barlow in the WPR racing machine. It's been so close between them. They've consistently been sort of rubber banding between a second and almost 2/10 of a second. But at the moment, it seems like Jo Skull is driving the wheels off his Porsche and just can't quite get enough. The aerodynamic benefit from the car in front is really, I think, more or less undoubtedly keeping him in this race, but later on the brakes, and maybe a little too late for Remco Barlow, a big lock up in towards the apex, forced him wide, ruined the run all the way down to turn 4, but we've seen this situation before. Is Jo Skull with running out of time? Is he going to get this move done? Not quite as yet. Takes the wider line in, tries to better the exit. Of course, he's driving around mechanical issues. I've got to say, I take my hat off to School with the heavy damage he sustained at the start of the race. He's continued on and really has piloted that Porsche with almost great professionalism, because there's no real reason for him to drive as competitively as he is. But even with the damage, he is pushing forward and doing what he can to better that position. So very well done to School. Somewhat close to the driver of the day, absolutely. But now you can see only, what, 3.5 minutes of the race remaining, and these cars have been the closest cars together for pretty much the past 15 minutes. So we'll keep an eye on them, and we'll bring you all of the action on the run up to the flag. So having just crossed the line to go on to what will be the final lap of the race, School still there or thereabouts, chomping at the bit for 4th place. The lead gap has massively come down. It's now within half a second on the final lap of the race. Can Chris Roberts hold on for just another 2 sectors here at Red Bull Ring? You can see we've ticked past the 25-minute mark, so the next time we cross the line, the drivers will see the checkered flag. Chris Roberts has led from, I think, around about the 7-minute mark, so he's really held on to this lead. But Pete Plastow has found another couple of gears in the closing stages of the race, and he's really applying the pressure. A big wobble from the tail end of the car. Very well held from Pete Plastow, I've got to say. The drivability of this car is only improving, but very well done to Pete Plastow for keeping that pointing in the right direction. But that has now secured the win for Chris Roberts if he can work his way through the final corner without any qualms. Yes, he can. Taking it nice and easy and towards the line for the final time this evening here at Red Bull Ring. Chris Roberts takes the win in the feature race ahead of Pete Plastow in 2nd place, his VRC teammate, and rounding out a full virtual racing compound podium is Matt Forrest. Very well done to the top 3. Remco Barlow fending off any further attentions from School, who has finished in a very respectable P5. Timothy van der Broek in the number 611 machine for stage 1 racing through the penultimate corner and in towards the final corner. He will go for the final time to take 6th place. You can see damage aboard that car, but yet another driver that has sustained damage and continued on nonetheless. Stuart Jacklin working his way through the final corner as well for Easy Racing. Well done to him, and Nicolas Cucatto will cross the line in just a few moments' time. Just up the road, Ari Sherwood finishes a lap down, but in 9th place. Very well done to Ari. And then the final of your finishes, Nicolas Cucatto working his way through the final corner now and across the line to round out your finishes. 3 retirements were Mariano Lazart, Cody Steig and Stephen Orrell retiring fairly early on in the race. But another 25 minutes worth of brilliant Porsche racing action here at Red Bull Ring from the virtual racing compound Porsche Super Cup. We will now have a look at the results from the 2nd race of the evening. Chris Roberts finished on the top step of the podium, almost 2 seconds clear from his teammate Peter Plastow. And Remco Barlow finished in 3rd place. He did take the podium, so evidently a penalty for Matthew Forrest demoted him right the way down into 7th place. So Remco Barlow did make the podium. School unknowingly was battling for a podium that entire time, finishing in 4th place, the privateer entry. Timothy van der Broek finished in 5th, Stuart Jacklin 6th, Matthew Forrest, after racing throughout the entire race, all trying to improve his position and maybe get another step on the podium. After all of that, it succumbed to very little, 44 seconds behind our race winner, Chris Roberts, finishing in 7th place, Nicolas Cucatto in 8th, Ari Sherwood in 9th, and then we get back to our retirees of Mariano Lazart, Cody Steig and Stephen Orrell. But from the 4th round of the virtual racing compound Porsche Super Cup, we were left with very little on the table. It was a great race from all parties. A few mistakes here and there, a little bit of contact, but I've got to say it was brilliant to watch. An absolute pleasure indeed. We go to Spa next time out for round 5, and we will rattle you through all of the action there as well. And with that being towards the midpoint in the season, we will make sure we get the points available to you as well, so you can see how the championship is shaping up in towards the final half of the season. I've been Jack Werrell, and you have been watching the Virtual Racing Compound Porsche Super Cup highlights from round 4. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you at Spa.